Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. For those who don't know, my name is Precious Adesina. I'm a London-based freelance arts and culture journalist. And today we're here with Satchel Lee to talk about her evocative photo series, X-Pressions. Born and raised in New York City, Satchel Lee stands as a dynamic photographer, filmmaker, and multimedia artist. Her distinctive body of work transcends conventional boundaries and is primarily anchored in the realm of portraiture. Collaborating with others in her community and frequently turning the lens on herself, Lee crafts imagery that celebrates the everyday. Her work serves as a poignant snapshot of contemporary life. They not only re examine memories tinged with ambiguity, but also delve into profound questions surrounding identity, existence, familial ties, and the enduring legacy we leave behind. She's a proud alumna of the Maurice Canber Institute of Film and Television at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, and she's currently pursuing an MFA in photography at the Art Institute of Chicago. So today we'll be having a brief chat about her work and, of course, her series. And then please leave some questions below because there'll be a short Q&A after. Thank you. So I guess a great place to start, Satchel, is to talk about your practice as an artist.
Great. Cool. Well, let's do it. Super happy to be talking with you today. Um, my practice as an artist. Yeah, that's a big question. I feel like I have always kind of been an artist and I've dabbled in lots of different mediums. And I've kind of arrived at this place where photography feels like the place where I can communicate most clearly. Um, and so, as you said, I I find myself like kind of rooted in this idea of like portraiture, but I think as I continue to work through my practice, I'm less I'm more open to like exploring, right? What that means. It's not, I love people, so it's nice to take pictures of people and myself because, we all have bodies and we all know what it feels like to inhabit that and what it means to walk around the world and present a certain way. But I'm also interested in objects and sound and installation and all of that. So, yeah, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so you've mentioned that photography allows you to best express yourself, but your work has taken on many roles, including as a writer, a filmmaker, and as a photographer. Like, how do these different aspects of your work complement each other?
Well, I think the thing about filmmaking or the way that I've done it, I'll start by saying like I studied film in undergrad at NYU, which is like a very like big film school, but it's also like an indie film school. Like you learn how to make indie films at NYU. Um, and so I kind of did that for a while, but I was always interested in the idea of like making films that would play in art galleries that maybe are more about like endurance or showing life in real time, or this idea of like like video art has always been like exciting to me, which is something that I felt a little uneasy and still do sometimes like pursuing because I feel like I have like a more traditional kind of understanding of like filmmaking. But I think like working with photo has kind of allowed me to go back into moving images in a different way. Um, and not kind of be like, okay, like act one, act two, act three. Like this is the structure we have to follow. Like all in all, filmmaking is just a series of images, right? It's like image after image after images just played together. And so I think my involvement in photography has kind of recontextualized the way that I see that. I think the same goes for like writing. As a writer, uh, like when I'm taking images, I'm like writing in my head. Um, Nobody sees the writing, but there is narrative. Uh, to the photographs. And so it all just kind of like flows back into each other. But I think, it's all coming from the same place. My work is very autobiographical. Uh, and so I have to kind of like start in this place, and then it's just like, okay, what's the best way to communicate this idea? But it starts with this like internal writing that's happening, this like dialogue, this like narrative or monologue. Yeah, and then it goes from there.
Awesome. So we have some photos of your work, of your
Uh,
photographs,
mhm.
and I think it would be great to maybe walk people through some of the different series that you've done and different photography projects that you've done, that we
Yeah,
have, so we can get sort of like a better understanding of your work.
sure. So this series is called Mama's Baby, and I was really interested in it, just kind of looking and at and manifesting the relationship between like adult son and mother. Um, and I laugh at this because when I say my work is autobiographical, I had a boyfriend who was very close with his mom. And I was like, I'm going to make these photos. Um, and so yeah, this is kind of just how it manifested. We can go to the next one. I think the thing about my photos that I really enjoy, or just about kind of the way that maybe I see the world, is that there's like a representation of the everyday, and then something that throws it into maybe a little bit more of a surreal space. So by adding this prosthetic, this like adult sized umbilical cord that like wraps these two, binds these two adults together. um we've seen this image of the mother with her adult son in the face, right? But what happens when we kind of bring it to this, make this metaphor a little bit more physical? Go to the next one. Yeah. um and I think one of the things that I'm interested in is the way that we can perform for camera. We can go to the next one. I'm I grew up in a house with a lot of artwork, and we had a lot of like photographs by James Van Der Zee. So I think about like the formal portrait a lot. Um, James Van Der Zee, right, from the Harlem Renaissance, he had a studio. People are coming to his studio. Black people are coming to his studio, dressing up in their like finest garb and being photographed in a way that we hadn't really seen before. So I feel like this kind of is always in the back of my mind when I'm taking photographs. There's something about that like ritual of like allowing your photo to be taken, that collaboration between photographer and subject. Um, that I really enjoy. And the other thing that is really powerful to me about those images is the direct to camera eye contact. I think that does something really interesting. It creates like a conversation between the firstly photographer and the subject. Um, there's that direct, address right there. But then it transfers on to the viewer, right? We have the person in the photo looking back at the viewer, and you kind of get this like weird, like time jumble going on, right? It's this conversation between present and past and present. And you have this like moment with somebody else where you really kind of get to stop and look, and they're looking at you knowing that that they're going to be looked upon. And I think that's really interesting, and especially I think as a photographer who mostly photographs Black people in America, to to create these images where Black people are looking back at their audience, you know and this is something that I find too, right? Like, and please stop me if I'm rambling. But when you present a Black person in a photograph, I get so many different readings on my work from different people, depending on where they're coming from and what their perspective is. I don't think it's my job as an artist to dictate how people should read the work. I'm coming from a particular position, and this, all the images are informed by my own experience. Um, but I present them, I put them out in the world, and then they take on a life of their own. And I always find it really interesting when people look at my work and have a completely different read than I intended. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually really interesting because the photograph then becomes a mirror for people, whether they realize it or not. I realize it, and I find that interesting. Okay, next. Okay, so this is a photo I did. It's an album cover. The gentleman in the middle, his name is Emmanuel Wilkins, and he's a saxophonist based in New York City. And this was the cover of his album, The Seventh Hand. So when we talked about what we wanted to shoot, we really wanted to communicate like a traditional baptism scene. My family is from the South. Both my parents are from the South. And so um, this kind of like, this is like a scene basically straight out of like, my mom was like baptized in a river in Virginia. Um, so yeah, we really wanted to like communicate that, but again, bring it out of what just what this moment is, and kind of inject it with a little bit of like a surreal lens. So you have the women on the right in their regular street clothes, they're not dressed in the white. We have a woman with her sunglasses and her big hat. Again, just to, this is what you think it is, but it's a little bit different. Next. Yeah, similarly with this one, if you can see on the top left hand corner, right, sorry, she has this mask on as he's being dunked and baptized in the water. Um, yeah, next one. Same thing here. And again, you have the direct to camera. Uh, they're looking at you, you're looking at them.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because when you say that your photos are rooted in the Black American sort of experience or your own idea of the Black American experience, I would say maybe, um, you can really see that in these specific photos and also kind of the different ways in which they can be expressed, if you
Yeah,
know what I mean. Yeah.
totally, totally. Well, and I think that's a really good point, and I appreciate bringing that up because I think that there can be a tendency to, and we do this with everybody, right? To overgeneralize and be like, it's this, or it's this, and that's it. And yeah, there's so many things, right? And what happens when we put them all together, right? This experience, or what we imagine of like, the Black American experience, can we represent them all at once? And, you know, maybe in the middle of these things, or like, is where like, you know, some type of like truth is, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Next. Um, so this is a self-portrait. I do self-portraiture quite a lot. I think it started because like I'm always here. So, if I want to take photographs, it's easy for me to just grab myself. And I started taking photos like on my birthday as a way to kind of mark time, because that's the thing about photography too, right? It's about light and time, like that. Those are the ingredients. And it just it's the best way to just like kind of like I'm interested in making an archive for myself, of all the people that I've come into contact with, who I've known myself. Like I'm just excited to be like 98 years old and like look at this kind of vast collection of images, and say like, okay, that's a life. um so this was for my birthday, I don't know how many years ago. And again, just thinking about like, what does it mean to get older? How do I present myself? I mean, this is not like a typical outfit for me, and just thinking about, you know, how do we, how can I, you know, how do I want to show up in this moment? So the next year, next image, I turned, I think that was maybe 25. I think that was 25. This was 27. I was really kind of thought that by the time that I was 27, I would be like married and like on my way to having kids. And that didn't happen. And so I really wanted to create this own wedding without a spouse, without a partner. And so I kind of like staged this, and it was this attempt at creating or like manifesting this like future, or this like what I thought was going to be present, making it happen nonetheless. Um, and this is a theme that happens in my work a lot. I think I'm working on a project right now, similarly, where I construct a set, a living room set, and I have actors, and we're a family. I'm the mother. I have a husband and a daughter and a mother, and um, I think so much of my work is about me like processing and like playing at these things that I wanted, um, or think I want, um, and trying to like master them in like a thing that I can handle. Um, so it really is so much about, I use the word playing because it is playing. It's like, like when you're a kid and you like play make believe, and you try to kind of like imagine what your life could be. I think photography is a big way that I do that.
Awesome. I just wanted to note that in the photograph, all the photographs that you've shown us, including like, if you put this series together, the two series together, and then the two photos we've just seen, the stylistic sort of the aesthetic style of the photographs are all very different. Was that intentional? Like, what was inspiring these different photographs?
I don't know that the like aesthetic choice was intentionally different. I think I I don't know. I think I create a scene and then I think I photograph it. You know what I mean? So like everything is very I think sometimes I can be a little like controlling in the way that I set things up. So like I just want to set up the image, and then it becomes something like almost like a sculpture, an object that I can then like move around with my camera. Like when I'm taking pictures, I'm like all over the place, right? And I want to kind of get things from all different sides. Um, so I think like to me, the images have a similar quality. Um, and I think that's kind of where the eye comes in, but they all call for different uh feelings, like in the setup, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm wondering if you could move to the next image, or we could, yes,
Oh
awesome.
yeah. Oh my God. I didn't even realize I had these. I
I
had
thought
them.
I,
No, I totally forgot. Okay. So this is more recent work. And I have started playing with AI. When I came to school, I'm in school in Chicago, so I'm a little bit removed from like my immediate community, and I wanted to work in a way that was small and by myself. And a way for me to do that and still work with people and faces was to work with AI generating software. So I used Midjourney, which is just like an extension you can use through Discord. And This image is a blended image of both my grandmothers. One grandmother who I'm very close with and grew up with, and one grandmother who I've never known. So I'm really, again, it's this like kind of attempt at kind of finding, figuring out this like past, while at the same time trying to like imagine this projected future of this person. I spent a lot of time with this image in my studio, and people come in and they're like, "Oh, like, is this you?" Which it doesn't look like me, so I don't know why that's the question. But I appreciate that like um, that thought, because I think that's part of what I'm doing as well, right? Like to have this combination of like where it started, on both sides of my family to like I'm trying to find this connection, and I'm really interested in family. I'm really interested in like particularly the female lines and family and legacy, and the ways in which women and my family in particular operate, and how we um, like exist and survive and thrive. So if you go to the next image, um, this is a text-based image. So the first one was image-based. This is text-based, and these two complement each other. Um, Similarly, it's the same idea, uh, but I was really excited by the idea of um, like the restraint of just having the back of the image, not giving access. Because even with, family members that you know deeply, like even my grandmother, who I love dearly and know very well, I'm like, I know I only know a little bit of her. You know what I mean? And I think so much of, even, within family systems, there's so much that we perform for each other. There's so much that we perform for, people outside of the family unit. And there's so much that is not said, um, as a means to like protect each other or protect yourself. Um, and so that's just something I was really considering during this series. The thing that I find really interesting about AI, I think can you go back to the last one? Sorry. So, what I really appreciate about this image is that from afar, it looks like it's maybe just a regular woman. But if you get up close, you can kind of see that her pupils go down to this like point. And that's just like a really subtle thing. But again, I think that's the thing that for me tips it into this other space of, yes, this is, maybe an image, a style of photograph that feels familiar and known. And at the same time, if you really allowed yourself to like kind of like sit and look and be here with this image for a while, it would start to kind of like fracture and fall apart. Same thing with the other image, right? You only have the next image. You only have there's no face on the other side of this, and that's really exciting. Again, it's a construction. It's an illusion. It's like a playtime. It's like AI. It's like working with, which I know. So the other thing that I'm considering, which is like, okay, like, like here's this thing, and we need to think about like all of the ethical stuff involved with it. Um, and I think especially too, like working as a Black artist, like the database is not uh it doesn't have all the information. I remember I was like interested in making these photographs of Black women with like hot combs, like traditional hot combs you put on a stove, and like was trying to like put in every like word I could to describe this like tool that is like just like a staple, right? Like in my household and uh in my kind of like community. I mean, it's an older tool, but nonetheless, right? And they just could not figure it out. They had no idea what I was
Interesting.
talking about. Yeah, so I
Yes.
have these
Hmm.
images of like these like beautiful like women, like Black women with like combs that are this big, and they're like holding it against their face, And I'm like, that's interesting. But also I'm like, is it interesting? Because like, I don't know, we already know that this is happening. Like,
Mm.
like I'm right. So anyway, and then again, the question is like when the software gets good enough, which I think these were made like last year, so we're already beyond that. Like, is it going to do the same things that I want it to do, which is kind of like blur the lines of, what's real and what's not. I don't know. I don't know. But it's just, again, something to explore.
It's awesome. You've kind of answered the question I was about to ask, which is how do you think AI can be used by photographers, especially ones representing Black experiences?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's a really interesting tool. The thing is, I think maybe with working with um, you know, non-white people, you can feed it images. So you can get it to go where you want. But doing that with text is a lot harder to do, like because it's pulling itself, right? So it doesn't know. Um, I think the discrepancies and like the mistakes that the machine makes can be interesting. Um, but also, you know, we're in a weird place also with photography right now. Like I think everybody has phones in their pockets. Everybody has a camera in their pocket. We're constantly taking pictures. We're constantly looking at images. Um, and so I think like in terms of like fine art photography, we're in a really weird space because our attention spans are not like ready to like have like a deep look at an image. Um, and I think it becomes increasingly difficult when we have images that are not real, they're like ones and zeros and we're used to quick looking. Um, you know, it kind of makes it a little bit difficult to, I don't know, just reconcile. And even when I think about this work too, like putting this work with like my like pure photography work, I think there's something I have to figure out with it too, right? Because this element of having it be like, artificially generated adds another layer to the work, right? That's always going to be a part of the thing. Like if you create an AI image, as much as I want to be like, oh, I'm just making images, like, and I'm using this tool and this software to help me do that because like, I'm being antisocial in my house, like it, it adds a whole other layer to like the work that you're making and becomes a part of the content of the image. And so that's something to keep in mind when working with, these softwares.
So thank you. Are there any? Yes. So we've moved on to the expression series, which is what you'll be showing in Photo London. I really love these, and I think maybe a great place to start with these is the name itself. Because for people who do get their hair done, Black people maybe mainly who get their hair done, expressions, the term itself will, mean a lot to them. I'm literally wearing expressions right now. So yeah, please tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah. So expressions is a type of braiding hair, and it is comes in a pack. They're not very expensive at all. And it's the hair basically is like plastic, and looks like hair, but it's basically a synthetic hair. Um, and when I started doing this series, I was thinking a lot about self-portraiture and was kind of just like walking around my house and kind of thinking. And I had all of this like braiding hair that I knew I wasn't going to use. And I started thinking about like when, you know, after you get your hair done and you take all your hair out, I always like end up with this just like pile of hair in my lap. And it's just got like all of this gunk in it, and it's just like everywhere, and it's kind of like overwhelming and consuming. And so I was thinking about that feeling, and that's how we ended up here. And the name is so good, uh, of the brand, because yeah, it's expression but with an X. And again, thinking about self-portraiture, thinking about the self, like how do you express, how the hair kind of becomes an expression of like who you are. Um, yeah. And so for this series, I don't know, there were a few things that I was thinking about. I mean, I think the first thing that I always come to is this idea of like I love getting my hair done, getting it braided. It's like the best because it gives me a chance to kind of put my hair away and protect it and kind of leave it alone and not touch it for a few months. But this hair isn't really good for you. Like it's not good for your scalp. It's not good for your body. It kind of like leaches toxins into your body. And, some people are allergic to it. It can be irritating. And then you take it out and it just kind of like sits in a landfill because it's plastic and it doesn't decompose. And it's just kind of this like cycle of like, okay, like I'm maybe harming myself, maybe harming the environment, but like maybe I'm not, conforming to like European beauty standards for once. And like maybe I'm ready to like take that, like, maybe that's the trade-off I'm like willing to make, which, I don't know, is real. Like I feel like, but at the same time, right, it's just like this all kind of consuming thing. I think about lately a lot. I've been thinking about I don't know. I don't know if vanity is the right word because it's not that. But just like showing up in a space as a woman, uh, and what that means and how we present ourselves and, all the things that we don't have to do, but, that we do to be presentable. Um, and, the trade-offs that come with that. And so, yeah, this is kind of where this was born. We can go to the next image. Um, yeah, I don't know, this hair in general, I think for a lot of people, but especially for Black women, uh, is such a huge thing. It's massive. It's huge. I mean, how many people saw Beyonce's video yesterday? I've watched it 7 times since then. Like of her washing her hair, right? And in the comments section, it's literally people being like, "That's not her hair." And she's like, "This is my hair." And they're like, "No, it's not. Like, you're wearing tracks." She's like, "This is my hair. You guys think I wear wigs and like because I wear wigs I can't have hair," right? Because there's this idea that like Black women can't grow hair. Like I don't know where that came from, racism, but like that's like an actual like discourse, which I just
Mm.
find so
Yeah.
fascinating, right? Like it's like here's someone who's like, this is who I am, this is like what my body does, this is what I grow, and people are like, she's lying to you guys. Like that's so wild. And so sorry, I love Beyonce. And so yeah, just it's just on, you know, my mind all the time. It's all consuming. I think about my hair all the time. Um, and you know, is it right? Does it look good? Does it communicate that like I'm an upstanding member of society? Like braids do that, right? Like rather than like having my like natural hair out, which is like big and full and like everywhere, like braids, although they are like more in line, I mean they are, right? Like they communicate Black hair, they communicate like Black pride in a lot of ways. They do still kind of like hang down and mimic the way that like European hair grows down, when my hair doesn't grow down. Like my hair goes like that, right? So yeah. So anyway, just this idea of how this thing can be so, it's a lot. And yeah, yeah, I think there's
Yeah, I
more.
love that you've kind of I was gonna use the term expressed, but I feel like that's not the right one to use in this particular moment. How you've kind of identified the, different aspects of, for example, using brands like X-Pressions, for example, because these are things that I think about a lot and I know a lot of people think about it. But also, the multitude of ways in which particular hairstyles can both be reaffirming and also in the same time at the same time feel like you're conforming. I do really love that complexity. Tell us a little bit about, this series. Some of the photos, the hair is kind of laying all over you and you're covered. Some of them is just on your legs. Walk us through kind of the different ways in which you decided to show the hair.
Hmm. I think it was just like an exercise of like, okay, here's this material, and like how how much can it cover me, you know, how much can I peek a little bit out, can you see my skin, can I completely obscure myself, and when I am seen, right, can I look at the camera and what does that mean to be like poking um out of this like mass of like, we know it's hair, we know it's like this hair like thing, but also like it could be something else. um can we go to the next image? Yeah, right, like to have a little bit of leg and a little bit of hand, and maybe that's not my leg, I mean, and maybe that's not a person, right, until you see the hand. I was really, and also I'm interested in the space where it is. I think I really enjoy like where we are, like coming in at this corner and this like couch. Um, because again, I'm thinking about like construction and like set. Like I think a lot about like set. Um, it's a living space. This feels domestic, and yet there's this like hair monster maybe, and why is it like here, like at this like cornered in this like position in the room, different than like having it straight on, right? That's like a different kind of relationship that the viewer has with the subject, and everything in this is kind of leading us to this point. um yeah, and I think in terms of having it in a series, right? I think there's like three images where we can see my face and three images where I'm more obscured. Um, and I'm coming back to the title, right? Which is like how we express. So much of it is through our face, right? But we can express through body language, like a hand that's closed and like a hand that's opened, like they mean different things, right? Which way they're faced means different things. Like a knee that's curled into a chest, even if you can't see the chest, connotes a different thing than something that's like out and like, presenting. Um, and so for me, yeah, it was just a matter of kind of like moving through these different emotions, different like expressions. Because I think, as you said before, right, there's kind of like a complexity here. It's not one or the other. It's kind of a maybe like a this can be like a container for, all these kind of like different feelings and ideas around this.
Yeah, for sure. And like what I really love about this photo, and you might not agree or you might agree, is that I feel like it emulates different sorts of like portraiture and paintings. For example, when I look at it, I think a lot about Ophelia by Sir John Everett Millais. I had to write that down because I was like, I might forget part of it. But that's a really famous painting, for example. And even though there's no water, there's no dress, somehow it's still kind of um you can still kind of see that sort of aesthetic in it. Would you agree with that?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking at that painting yesterday, actually. Um, but yeah, totally, totally. And again, I mean, I think that's the thing that's cool too, that I've been thinking a lot about, right? Which is just, this is like also another idea that I've had, kind of unrelated, but I'll just say it because it's on my mind. Um, like I just think about a lot of times like how like it's such a coincidence that like I'm like in my body. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm like, whoa, like I just kind of like landed here and like I'm, making work. And I don't think I had seen this painting when I had done this image, right? But I just love this idea of these like kind of like as humans, we just kind of cycle through things, and you might be on the different, completely different side of the planet or a different time than somebody else, and kind of we just kind of like move through these like similar kind of, I mean, in this instance, like poses, experience, like everybody's just kind of, we're just kind of repeating things and until the end of time. And there's so many different iterations because we're all coming from our different perspectives. And I always find that really exciting.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah, it's there's very few times where I think about the fact that I'm a person within my body.
Isn't it
When,
crazy?
yeah, but when you do, it does feel very strange.
It's so wild. It's like, oh my God, okay. Like you just kind of showed up.
Yeah, for sure. And then like for people who might not necessarily see the link straight away, how would you say this series fits into the work that we've just spoken about, your previous work?
I think it fits in because I think it comes in as the kind of like surreal side. I think that for me is always something that I'm thinking about in the back of my head. So that definitely comes in there. Um, and then again, right? Like we have images direct to camera. And I think particularly this time, like preoccupied with the idea of like portraiture. Like here's a photo of someone acting as though, or not acting, but someone in this particular instance. But at the same time, it's an image that is a marker of time for me. Like, here I am in this moment of time. In like 2021, I think maybe is when this is from. Um, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, to where my work has been now, where it is now, it's different, but they you can see those very kind of like basic foundations. They're all the same, and that's always really exciting too. Because I also feel like most artists, um, and people in general are always talking about the same thing forever, and they just approach it in different ways.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you feel like your work talks about several different things?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's about identity. I think recently it's been a lot about family, a lot about family. Uh, the creation of family, the myth of family, the performance of family. Um, uh, and all of that, when I say it, it sounds bad, but it's not. um, but yeah, I think that's the where I am now. But again, I think a big part of it is the performance, right?
Awesome. And then like how would you've mentioned this in parts, but it'd be really great to hear how you feel like your work has evolved, especially because you've mentioned that it's kind of changed from this particular time, which was 2021, and there's quite a few years there as well.
Yeah. I think honestly, I'm finishing up grad school now. I graduate next month, and I this has been a really amazing time for me because I think when I first started photography, I was working more in like an editorial, like commercial space. Um, and I think for me, what I've really uh, started to understand more is my process. And so I think my work, so much of it is about the process for me. And photography is interesting because you want to get like one image or a group of images that kind of like communicate, like, the thing that you want to say. Um, and that can be really difficult. And so I think that my work, honestly, like I'm learning about the process. And yes, there's a final image, but the process is really, that's the work, right? That's the
Mm.
thing. Um, and so that's changed. I think like stylistically, maybe I'm finding like more of my voice. Maybe I'm identifying more explicitly the things that I'm interested in, right? Rather than I was like, okay, let me take this picture. Now it's kind of more um about you know, I'm thinking more deeply about like certain themes and also where this falls like on the, in a line of art. Like I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. And yeah, I'd be very much interested in you walking us as much as you can anyway through your process, and how you get to that final image. And because of course a lot of it is what goes on before and after, rather than within that particular moment where you're taking the photo.
Totally. Yeah. I just sit and I think a lot. Like I just will think for like 2 months and then feel bad about myself because I'm not actually making anything. Um, so that's kind of how the process goes. It's just a lot of like notes, a lot of just writing notes and thinking and um and then I'll make something. Um, and because of the way that I work, like typically like I'll work with like a crew, like a small crew, or a larger crew. Like with what I just shot, maybe there was like 15 people, right? So it's like, you know, wardrobe, lights, um, set design, stuff like that. Um, and so it's very difficult, I think, because like what I would really love to do is to be able, and this is kind of, I'm manifesting for the future, like so much of I think photography and just art in general is about like doing things over and over and over again, like to have like a long-term project to just be like, okay, like let me continue to like work and discover. And I think a lot in the ways that I work, because I'm coming from a film background, which is so much about like pre-production. You pre-production so that you do 90% of the work so that when you get to set, you can just put the actors in place, get everything going, and then go. And the magic comes from the actors. It comes from things that you didn't expect to happen. But you've got one shot basically. That's how I work as a photographer. I'm like, let's do pre-production. We get to set. We're gonna shoot it in a few days, and then I go and I sit with the images. Um, and that's difficult because then you get back and you're looking at images and you're like, oh, I should have gotten this. I should have gotten that. Um, but what I'm starting, or trying to realize, right, is like, you get what you get, and then you make meaning from maybe images that you didn't think could go next to each other, or you like, you know, something else comes out of that in a way that you didn't anticipate. I think the thing is always like, because I spend so much time like in the pre-production like thinking part of it, when I get to set, it never looks how I thought it was going to look. And that's hard. Every time I'm like, "Oh my God," like but that's part of it. That's part of it. And I think and honestly, I think it turns out for the better, right? Like but there is a little bit of like a oh my God. And then whenever I get my film back, um, it usually takes me like about a few months maybe to like begin to appreciate my images, um, which again is something that I'm working on.
Mm.
I just can be like self-critical, so like I really do need to spend time with the work to see the value in it. Because when I just get it back, it's just always like, oh my God, I messed it up. Like, and I don't know what that is.
It's
Um,
that age-old saying that you're your own worst critic, aren't you?
it's true. It's true. like, so so I'm really trying to be patient with myself and allow myself um like grace, and to maybe come at images with more of a try to like remove myself. And I think this was something that I was talking about with somebody else the other day. Instead of trying to like coming at it with like this critical eye, like just like looking at things and like kind of identifying what I see, right? What do I see? What's happening in this image? Like, actually, like what's really going on. Um, Not putting judgment on it, but just looking at it for what it is, um, and appreciating that. So that helps.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to move on to the Q&A very shortly, but I have maybe two more questions.
Mhm.
And so one of them is a very obvious question, and you've answered it in some parts, but like who inspires you at the moment? What sort of artists and periods and artworks are you drawing from?
Well, I think like my, you know, top, I think is always Carrie Mae Weems. I think she's just like incredible. And I think again, right, thinking about different ways that you can be an artist. She works across many mediums. Um, she's a brilliant writer and filmmaker. And yeah, I think she's just kind of like, the golden standard for me. But I look at a lot of different type of art. Um, and I grew up as a dancer, so I think about dance a lot. I think about Pina Bausch a lot. Um, Thinking about like femininity and gender and relationships. I think she does a lot of that in her work. Um, like I think about Miranda July a lot. I love Miranda July. I feel like she's a new book coming out. It's not out yet. But I think Miranda July, my love for Miranda July, like kind of like speaks to this idea about like surrealism. I don't know if you could call her kind of a surrealist artist. I don't know if that would be exactly right, but she's definitely off, which I love. Um, yeah, so those are some artists that I really kind of like think to and or think about a lot. Um, and there's so many amazing photographers. Like I said now, right? Like I think like every day it's just like finding new people on the internet who are doing like really interesting, exciting things. But I think the thing that I'm really excited about is like there's kind of like a lot of like experimental work, that's happening like with like experimental processes and things like that. That's not the kind of photographer that I am, but it's really exciting to see what people can do with the medium. Um, so that's always just something I'm like, wow, like, right, you could really do anything, and this can be, it doesn't have to be so straightforward. It could really be, you can just get back to the chemistry and produce something.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. I love the people that you mentioned, and I'm really glad that you mentioned Carrie Mae Weems as well, because I can really see that inspiration in your work. It's like really there. So I was really happy to hear that that's true. And where do you see your work heading in the future? Like, what is your vision for the future of your photography?
It's a great question. Um, I just want to be making photos for like a really long time, and I'm not sure where they're going to be seen or end up. But I would really love it for people to just like spend time with the work, whether that's in galleries or museums or, you know, maybe it's like public kind of like installation things, which I think is important, right? Because like, I don't know, it's nice to have work just out in the world, right? Like that's what it's for. It's not really meant to be, I mean, depending on who you are, right? But it's not supposed to be like kind of like sequestered, locked away and then okay, you can look at it. It's 5 o'clock, get out, like um so yeah, so that's kind of the feeling. But I don't I mean I'm excited. It's in London. I'm like, ooh, international.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Will you be coming to London to see your work?
I won't know. It's literally the
That's,
week right before graduation, so I've got some last minute stuff to finish up.
that's a good excuse anyway. We'll allow it. So moving on to some of the questions, we've got a
Uh-huh.
few here. One of the first questions, which is an interesting one, and it kind of ties into your studies, which is great, is how has it been to study art in the US? And have you faced any issues as a woman image maker, and particularly with making self-portraiture?
Yeah. Well, I've only ever lived in the US, so I can't really talk about what it's like versus the UK. Have I faced any issues as a woman image maker in self-portraiture? I don't know if I faced any external issues. I think about it a lot. I think about being a woman and like, you know, do I how much of my body do I want to put out there, right? Like I think about that a lot. Because like there are a lot of like really great female photographers that I love who I don't think it's fair to say that they like sexualize themselves, but they appear in images in a kind of like sensual kind of like manner that maybe uh is in line with like how we think about, like, traditional female sexuality, and like they do really well. um and you know commentary on it, critique, but also embodiment, and like how that becomes like a sign of like power. I think all of that's in it, so that's something that I think about in terms of like being a woman and presenting myself for uh I don't want to say consumption, but that's what it is, right? Like, like to be looked at. Like, everybody's always like, ugh, I don't want to be perceived. And like, I feel like that sometimes. But also, I'm like, well, okay, I do want to be perceived. Just how do I want to be perceived and why? Um,
Yeah.
so that's something that I think about.
Yeah, awesome. And that kind of moves on.
External.
Sorry?
I said I don't really think that's external though. That feels, but maybe it is like external from the whole system. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like the system, well, there's a lot of questions you have to ask yourself based on the way in which society already perceives woman or artist or all those various factors that come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And someone has a really great question here about when you're photographing other people. How concerned are you with subjects feeling like they look good, or want? I think the question is wanting to look good.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever had anyone say they didn't want a photograph to be seen or exhibited, and how do you deal with something like that?
I haven't had that. I am the kind of photographer who is always telling my collaborators how gorgeous and beautiful they look. Like that's just like I'm just like, oh my God, you look amazing. Because they do. Uh, and I feel like I appreciate this question because I had one critique where I showed the mama's baby work with the umbilical cord. And one of the comments I got was, they're too beautiful. And I thought that was really interesting because I don't know what that means. Uh, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's supposed to mean to me. Um, and yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I feel like people are beautiful. And like, and here's the other thing. I feel like everybody is beautiful, right? And I think my job as a photographer is to get that across, right? Like I am not a street photographer. Like I am not the kind of person who can like go up to someone without them looking and like shove a camera in their face and like dip out. Like that's not how I operate. Like I need your full cooperation. I need us to be aligned. I need you to feel good. Like I can't do that. And so yeah, if somebody was like, I don't like this image, drop it. Like I want people to look at an image that I took of them and feel really good. Like that's super important to me. I want to make people feel beautiful. I want them to feel like, oh my God, like you really captured like me, you know?
I love that.
Yeah.
And your mama's baby, am I getting that right?
Uh-huh.
Mama's baby. What I really liked about those photos kind of is like almost if you don't notice the umbilical cord, it almost feels like fashion photography.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. And I think like I have, background in like fashion photography. So there is that's part of it too, right? There is an editorial sometimes quality to the work. Um yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, I mean Mama's boy. I knew I was saying something wrong.
I'm a baby.
Um, would you describe your AI generated images as photography? Oh yes, it is Mama's baby. My apologies.
I would describe them as images. I think the image-based ones maybe, I don't know if I would describe them as photography. I think they're images. I think when I'm using these softwares, I'm making images. And that's uh more of what I'm concerned about than the actual, because I'm not there's I shoot mostly with film photography, and that is such a like a tactile embodied experience. And that's part of why I love the medium. So when I'm making AI images, I don't think of that as photography, but I'm making images.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very debated topic at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, Someone has asked, what's your favorite work among your photographs?
Hmm. I really love the photos we did for the seventh hand. That was the baptism. I
Yeah.
really love that image. I just love the water, the reflection of the water. I love their expressions. I love that you can't really tell where that was in Queens, New York. You can't tell that it's Queens. It becomes kind of this like every I don't know. It feels really deeply like rooted. And oh, you should definitely listen to the album if you haven't listened to it. Emmanuel Wilkins, The Seventh Hand. He's fantastic. Um but yeah, I love those photographs. And yeah.
Amazing. I'll take a couple of more if we have the time, I think. To what extent is your process possible because you're at grad school? How are you going to sustain this process going forward?
Mhm.
Interesting question.
I think for me, uh well, I've just grad school is an amazing time, and I feel very lucky to have been able to spend 2 years just like thinking about my practice. Um, Moving forward as I graduate, I also work commercially, so I do like advertisements for different like brands, and like I feel very lucky because that I can do I can use my craft to like take care of everything. And then I also have my fine art practice on the side. Um, and I think I used to think that like, commercial work that I did and my fine art work were really kind of like two separate things. But now I've started to realize that they're actually not that separate. And when a client comes to me to work on something, they're coming to me because they understand the kind of work that I do, and that's what they're asking for, right? So like if I'm going to do a shoe ad, I'm going to like build like a big sculpture, right? And then like photograph that, and that's another way for me to kind of like continue to work on my craft, to continue to like experiment with ideas, all the while like by, being paid for it, which is great. Um, so yeah, for that's kind of how I, in the most immediate future, am like moving forward. But I, but as we talked about before, like I just want to make like work where people can like really sit with these images, and whether it's museums, galleries, wherever, like that's the dream.
Awesome. And will you return to film in terms of with your art?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I just made a short film recently, and it felt kind of strange because it was like in this new context. Um, but I'm a writer, I do write, and I think sometimes film feels difficult, and I can be a little shy and nervous about it, but I am not going to do that anymore. So, so yes, I'll definitely be making films in the future.
Oh, will we get to see any portions of this again? Or in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. This new project that I'm releasing, I don't know. I'm like putting out next week. There's photographs and a film component to it. So definitely check that out.
Awesome. We're looking forward to it. And then the last question is, how do you decide what works you want to create using AI, which you've somewhat answered? But they're also asking what other works you'll be creating, and will any of them relate to the extension series, such as creating some sort of mystical sort of creature?
Yeah. I like I was saying before, like I think we as artists maybe kind of have these ideas and play with them for years and years. So maybe there's a moment where I kind of go back to the expression series and I wonder what it would be like to maybe um, make these photographs into sculptures and have them in a space, and what's the different resonance of that, versus a photograph. um, and and I'm not like a huge tech person, but like I think there's space for like, like AI intervention in that, maybe through like um 3D printing or something like that, to make like, sculptures and things like that. That's like something that I've thought about. Like, okay, how can like AI, what's the other output besides like images? Like, what else can this like machine or like think, what can they do besides just making like, these flat images? Can we make things physical? A question that I've had. Yeah, and I think the other part of the question is like, how do you decide to use AI versus images? And I think for me, like AI, like always begins as like an experiment. Like I think when I go and I shoot something, I'm like, okay, here are the steps. Here are the steps. AI sometimes gives me more space to just like kind of like play around. And like I always use it as an exercise. It's like, okay, what about this with this with this? Like, what happens if I like write this thing and put it into this thing and it, you know, spits something out, and then I refine from there, and like really kind of, it's like becomes like chiseling, a piece of something, I don't know, stone or whatever. Um, so yeah, but again, right? Like I said, like, as the software gets more and more sophisticated, I think I'm less interested in it because you don't have like the little discrepancies, you don't have the tells, and those are really exciting to me. Um, so I don't know, we'll see. I'm still playing around.
It's interesting. I really like your thought process behind a lot of your work. It's very nuanced and interesting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's been so lovely speaking to you today. And I hope everyone else has enjoyed this chat as much as I have. Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.